This is Chris Bravata from Insight. Welcome to today's webinar. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be joining us from. Our webinar today is on stretch assignments. You'll see on the first screen we have a quote from Jack Walsh that says, "It's not the same train with a little more speed, double the speed of the bullet train. Don't go 10 miles an hour faster. That's what stretch is." Can we go to the next slide, please? So, again, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Leading us today will be Dr. Christy Smith. She is the lead assessment manager with Pinsight. And then just a brief introduction about Pinsight and our organization. You'll see some of the organizations that we work with on the right side, different languages that our solution is translated in. To give you a brief intro about Pinsight, we are focused on talent management. We are a software company that really focuses on spinning talent management away from the guesswork of rear-view mirror resumes and performance reviews. We're focusing on data accuracy and forward-looking potential. So think about it. Manager reviews are about as accurate as the flip of a coin. Heads you gain, tails you lose. Our technology accurately identifies talent ready to drive strategy today, in 6 months, or in 12 months. The results give organizations a development roadmap specific to each individual. So whether your focus is on succession planning, high potentials, leadership development, talent reviews, hiring, or promotions, talent management has a new ally, and that's Pinsight. Now I'd like to turn it over to Christy to lead our presentation today.
Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. Let's dive into the topic today of stretch assignments. So people generally operate at only about 60 to 65% of their potential, research suggests, and a stretch assignment really pushes them to unleash the creative energy within them to achieve important business goals. A good stretch assignment helps employees step out of their comfort zone, acquire new skills, and learn how to cope with uncertainty and risk. The ultimate goal of the stretch assignment is to unleash that creative energy to do things quicker, better, and cheaper. So looking at this slide, you'll see that we can think of the word stretch as an acronym. A good stretch assignment is supported, which means the employee owns the entire project, and you provide that ongoing support. Providing support doesn't necessarily mean that you micromanage. Rather, it's acting as a consultant, asking good questions that helps the employee with making final decisions and reflecting. A good stretch assignment is also tracked, which means that you'll closely monitor its completion and clearly define what success looks like. We encourage you to discuss the expectations with the employee and agree on checkpoints throughout the assignment. When tracking the stretch assignment, remember the 2 Ds, deliverables and deadlines. Discuss with the employees what deliverables they're at each stage of the assignment and when they present those deliverables to you. A good stretch assignment is also realistic. Although a stretch, the employee must believe that it can be done. A good stretch assignment is empowering, meaning that you must assign the entire project with a beginning, a middle, and an end to the employee. It's not simply delegating a set of unrelated tasks. A good stretch assignment is also targeted to the employee's current skill level and development needs. So when we think about the behaviors that the employee is practicing, it's important to think about what assignment would provide the most opportunities to exhibit those behaviors. And a good stretch assignment, lastly, is challenging. It actually stretches the employee's skills. We can think of this in terms of a problem. A problem is stretching when a solution is not readily available to the employee. Creating a good stretch assignment can be challenging in and of itself. So let's look at a few ideas for doing that. Two options exist for a stretch assignment. The first is a vertical stretch, and the second is a horizontal one. In the vertical stretch, the assignment is closely aligned with the employee's current activities. The stretch comes from more challenging goals than usual. For an example, an employee may be in charge of sales performance and could be given the goal of raising sales in the unit by 45% instead of 15%. Other ideas for vertical stretch include increasing responsibility, improving team morale, increasing productivity or efficiency, or maybe reducing costs. Conversely, a horizontal stretch, the employee takes on responsibilities that are significantly different from their current job. For example, an assistant who normally doesn't manage others is assigned to supervise an intern. Other examples could be leading a task force, launching a new product, influencing across boundaries, or perhaps managing a diverse team. So an important consideration when creating a stretch assignment is that the balance between the challenge of the assignment and the risk to the organization. A stretch assignment shouldn't be challenging enough that the person feels stretched. That is, they don't have a readily available solution to the problem or a level of competence, but they should at least have some relevant skills that will help them be successful. So the question becomes, what are the leadership skills and the minimal levels of competence that the employee needs to complete this assignment? The second part of this balancing equation is the risk of failure to the organization. Areas where success is critical should not be used for a stretch assignment. Two options exist to manage the potential risk. First is create the stretch assignment is a low-stakes setting or intensify the support that the person has. Low-stakes settings may include certain areas of the business, customers, or matters internal to the organization. For example, a junior consultant could be assigned to a project that addresses the firm's internal efficiency issues instead of deploying the consultant to manage a client project. Or the consultant could be assigned to a nonprofit or to a smaller client rather than a larger client. Another way to manage risk is to intensify support. So again, support doesn't mean supervising or micromanaging the employee. Rather, it means more check-in points, more deliverables, more milestones, maybe more observations or more meetings. So instead of letting the employee run with the project entirely on their own, the manager can stay closely behind, only interfering when necessary. So we'll talk about the role of the managers in the stretch assignments a bit later. So perhaps the birthplace of the stretch assignment was General Electric in the 1990s, hence the quote from Jack Walsh in the beginning of this webinar. He used the analogy of the Japanese bullet train to describe the concept. The idea is that it's not the same train with a little more tweak, that it's really double the speed. So notice that Welsh identified the what. What is the ultimate outcome? He didn't tell people how to go about solving the problem. The how is where the learning happens. When you give a stretch assignment, we encourage you to specify what the ultimate outcome or deliverable is, but let the employee figure out how to get there. Support them, of course, as needed during this process. So there's a big distinction, again, between empowering and delegating. Delegating means simply completing the task. However, when you empower, you assign a complete project to the employee, a project that has a middle, a beginning, and an end. It's not a bundle of unrelated tasks. When you give a stretch assignment, we encourage you to discuss the employee's level of interest, agree on deliverables and deadlines, and this will allow you to closely track the project and support the employee as needed. It's also really important to clarify the outcomes in the beginning. So how will you and how will the employee know that they have succeeded in this assignment? Some questions we use are, what does success look like? What metrics should we use? What is the baseline and how does it compare to what you achieved? Or how will you know if you're on the right track? Engaging in that discussion regarding the deliverables can be a really helpful way to ensure that both parties have the same understanding and that the deliverables are clearly defined. Once you've agreed on the specifics with the employee, think of yourself as more of the consultant. The hallmark of a good consultant is that they ask good questions and they don't take projects away from their clients. So make a commitment to check in regularly. We also recommend being specific. So for example, I'd like to serve as a resource for you. How would you feel about me checking on the project every 2 weeks? Resist the temptation to solve the person's problems. When you find yourself itching to provide an answer or solution, ask a question instead. Help them reflect on their experience. Help them talk through their decisions. Help them arrive at the solution on their own. Now let's combine the idea of feedback and stretch assignments together. So looking at this graph, we'll see that researchers have found the greater the level of challenge, the greater the level of skill development, but only to a certain degree. this relationship reaches a point at which skill development will level off or even decrease. And the reason is quite obvious. When the challenge is too great, people begin to feel overwhelmed and they give up. However, feedback can offset this diminishing effect. And employees learn more and help employees learn more from a challenging assignment.
Christy, I'd like I'm sorry for interrupting. Just to look the participants. If anybody has any questions, there's the question link on the right side of your screen. Go ahead and type in the question there, and we'll make sure that those questions get answered. So I just want to make sure that the participants realize that that's available in case somebody has a burning question that they'd like to get answered. So sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to put that out there.
That's okay, Chris. Thank you. That was a good time for the question. I was just about to transition to show you an example of how you might be able to collect this data to make stretch assignments. So an important component of the stretch assignments is understanding where the current skill levels are and where that individual needs to stretch. That's a key to making sure that that level of challenge in the skill development is really going to occur based on that level of challenge. So right now I'll transition over to our reporting and what we offer in our simulation platform. And what you're looking at here is an example of an individual report. Of course, our reports are all based on business strategies. So you'll see at the top I've selected 3 strategies for this particular example. Turn around key performance by increasing accountability, increase retention and engagement of team members, and increase customer satisfaction by improving customer service. So that's what we're looking at for this one individual, Victor Graham. And this particular report is what we call a SWOT analysis. So it's important in stretch assignments and leadership development, really in performance management, anything talent management related, that we start with good assessment data when we're designing our project. And that same is true for stretch assignments. It's important that we start with this data so that we can really tailor this to the individual, but also manage the risk for the company at the same time. So getting at that balancing equation, using quality assessment data is one way to help find that balance. So on this particular page, we'll see that Victor has a number of different strengths. Of course, we wouldn't necessarily target these for stretch assignments because these are things he's already skilled at doing. Rather, what we would do is move down here to some of his opportunities, and these would be the prime behaviors to target for stretch assignments. Starting with the one here at the top, influencing others. This is what we see as his easiest fix based on the simulation data that we've collected during the course of the simulation. The opportunities here are rank ordered, so that this should be the easiest for him to obtain. And then moving down here, we'll see that he has one longer-term development opportunity. So when we're compiling a stretch assignment for Victor, we could look at this information to determine what skills are really going to be important for him to stretch, whereas he also has a basic level of competencies so that it's not too much of a challenge for him. Analyzing information may be a bit of too much of a stretch because his skill level here is lower relative to the other behaviors. So any of these other behaviors might be prime for targeting the stretch assignment. The other screen that I'd like to point to is our gap analysis screen. And here we also have the behaviors, or the colors here indicate the current skill level. So yellow is considered an easy fix or a quick fix. These are his opportunities. We wouldn't focus on developing capable teams because he's already strong at this. However, if we look at managed priorities, then we're also able to gain some insights as to what his personality is. So when we're tailoring the stretch assignment, we can help him think of ways to combat maybe some of these negative tendencies in this case. For example, Victor is not particularly organized. It's going to interfere with his ability to manage priorities. So we can incorporate this in the feedback and the discussion with Victor in terms of how we both develop the stretch assignment as well as how he progresses through that stretch assignment. And then we can do that for all of the different behaviors that we're focusing on. And this can allow us to have a conversation with Victor about really what interests him in terms of developing these behaviors and skills, and how might he experience that development path, which can be very helpful in terms of allowing him to proactively address some of the resistance he might face. So with that, I'd like to open it up to see if there's any more questions from the audience. Chris, did we receive any questions?
One question came in, was about the length of a stretch assignment. So the question is, when you're thinking about stretch assignments for employees, how long should the stretch assignment be? When you talk about a beginning, a middle, and an end, it's just, weeks, months. Can you comment on that?
Sure, that's a great question. So we typically recommend about 100 days. The research suggests that with repeated practice, with daily repetition, that a person can acquire a new behavior or skill and that it can become somewhat automated in the course of about 66 days. So we recommend focusing on right around 100 days, not too long and not too short. So the person will see an improvement within that time period, but it's not too long that it becomes overwhelming.
Great, thank you. One additional question, reference the slide that you were showing. So it says that as an employee is engaged in a stretch assignment and you're providing feedback, if you see that the employee is not on track, does the stretch assignment change over time as far as the goals and metrics and outcomes based on how the employee is performing throughout the course of the stretch assignment?
Right, that's a great question, and I think that gets to empowering the employee as well. So you're not just delegating this task per se and saying complete this. There really should be that feedback wherein the stretch assignment can be tailored based on what's realistic for that individual, based on what they're experiencing when they're going through the stretch assignment, and empowering them to make the decisions about how they move forward.
Excellent. One additional question. Is there a way to determine if an employee will not be able to handle the added stress of a stretch assignment?
That is a great question. So we can look at a number of different metrics. For example, in the Pinsight platform, we look at a component of resiliency. So how individuals are able to bounce back from stress and how they're able to handle that. So that could be one factor that's taken into account. This can also be a conversation with the employee, so asking them and really setting up the expectations in the front that it should be an open dialogue, and that if at some point it becomes too much for them, that they communicate that openly so that the stretch assignment can be tailored again to make sure that it's realistic and that it's finding that perfect balance of being challenging but not too overwhelming for that person.
One additional question came in. As you give employees stretch assignments, some employees might feel that a stretch assignment might be tied to a type of merit increase or bonus. How do you manage the expectation of stretch assignments for professional development versus stretch assignments for financial increase?
That is a great question. And I think, again, that goes back to the initial discussions and making sure that you're setting up that open communication with the employee and really letting them know in the beginning that this is for development purposes and gaining their buy-in in terms of their desire to work on their development rather than kind of using this as an intrinsic motivator for some other purpose, such as a promotion or salary increase. Really trying to get the employee invested in the intrinsic cause of stretch assignments, I think, is going to be the most powerful way to use this for development.
Great. Last question that I have that came through is, as you engage in the stretch assignments, and you just mentioned 100 days, how often is the manager and the employee meeting throughout the stretch assignment?
That's another great question, and I think that varies. I know personally for me, I've worked with some employees who prefer to meet less often. They're a bit more, they prefer to work a little bit more independently, so they want to meet every 2 weeks instead of every week. And I find it's most helpful to let them guide that discussion. So if they feel that every 2 weeks is most appropriate for them, great. With the understanding that the door's always open. If there's a roadblock they encounter, we can meet more frequently. But setting up those expectations again, I think in the beginning is helpful, and then also allowing the employee to dictate what's going to be most helpful for their development.
Great, excellent. That's the last question that I had on my list. Any additional questions? Nothing coming through. I want to thank everybody for your time and participation this morning. Hope that you found the information valuable and helpful, and as you think about stretch assignments, hopefully you can take some of the tips and strategies that Christy presented in the presentation. You see my email address and Christy's. If you have any questions about the presentation, anything that arises after we hang up, by all means, please feel free to email either Christy or myself. Again, I want to thank you for participating. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch as our next webinar is scheduled.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Chris.